You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of WebTrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. WebTrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Robin Williams, co-founder and managing director of Hive. Robin has been involved in and around marketing and conversion rate optimization since 2013. Hive provides research data to agencies to help them align their services to be successful in a challenging digital world. So Robin, in one of your recent blog posts, you suggested there were two questions to unlock business growth. The first was, why do you want to grow? And the second was, what does growth look like for your business? It seems to me that these questions are very unlikely for a business to ask itself. So firstly, what do you believe are the best reasons for a business wanting to grow? And secondly, what are the most common answers you get to what growth looks like?
I think it's a good question, this, because I think a lot of business, when business starts, there's just this assumption that it's growth that they're chasing, and people say, we're growing and we're doing this, and all their activity is around growth. I think quite a few businesses and business owners sometimes have never actually sat down and defined why they want to grow and what does that growth look like. And I think for me and the people I've been working with, it's something that's really useful to come back and ask time and again, because that may change over time. The answers are very different for everybody. And I think this is one of the reasons I ask that question to a lot of people I work with, because growth is different to different people and it means different things. And again, once you sort of unravel what that growth, the why they're trying to do something, it's a lot easier to start defining what that needs to look like and support that business in getting that steps. So some business I've worked at, they want to grow in terms of team size. Their idea of growth is to have a big office, lots of people in the space, and that's their growth. But if I challenge them on where profitability is in that, because you can have a great big team, you can be a big business with lots of great office space, something we're seeing now through the COVID side, actually, is that what growth should look like? Or could you be a small team but highly profitable? And is that the kind of growth that people want? Is it more customers or less customers but bigger clients? So I think it's a very important thing before any business tries to grow, is to just define those two questions, really.
And that, when you think about the growth, do people tend to put a turnover figure on it?
There's a lot of KPIs people will say, different ones that apply to them. And I do remember being in a meeting as part of a senior team with quite a large organization, 100 million plus. And they were showing the KPIs and said, but this dashboard of KPIs, it's these 5 we need to look at. And quite a few was remarked. They're saying, well, surely the key performance indicators should be the only ones that we watch, not the other things. It's kind of all these different drivers of growth. Revenue per person is an interesting KPI or number that people have heard. Different SaaS and startup companies talk about this in a few different ways, mostly from the American side of business. And it's one that I don't think a lot of British companies I've spoken with have considered. As a business, if your revenue per person goes up and you're profitable, is that a good sign of growth? Do you need to grow more people, or is that just working because you want to stay a small team that's manageable, but actually your profitability goes up?
It seems like that's a pretty good indicator. And as you say, I've been aware of it having worked for American companies in the past.
Yeah.
But I think that whilst turnover is a good measure of growth, they used to say that turnover is vanity and profitability is sanity. Do people look at the bottom line as regard to a growth figure?
I think it's different. Having spent some time in analytics and reporting, it's amazing how little view people have from a digital side. There's some drivers of numbers that people have a view of, the traditional business metrics, but they don't really seem to have a view of what the audience is doing and what it's likely to do. A lot of analytics and reporting for business growth I've found is post-action. So what's happened to now? It doesn't really forecast very well. And some people say that that's very hard to do. It's like fortune telling. But actually, what you can start to do is look at trends, and you can look at other factors around what's happening in the world. And that's something where I think, businesses could potentially understand a little bit more, but it has to be very, very much bespoke for their view, and defining why they want to grow and what that growth looks like makes it very easy then for a business. It's not an easy task, but it's easy to then focus on what those outcomes are.
Because I would suggest that cash flow forecast and business projections with regard to turnover and profitability using the cash flow is a very strong key performance indicator when you're looking to grow. But is that part of the normal modus operandi of companies, and so they don't take that into account with regard to how they're going to move from A to B to C to D?
I think cash flow, I mean, it's the lifeblood of the business. There's lots of big companies reliant on cash coming in, and as soon as that gets stalled, that's something that I noticed very quickly in March, how little runway people had behind them, and how quickly big companies were shaken, probably pretty much the foundations of, as soon as the cash flow stopped, there was no month or two in reserve. Some had maybe 4 or 5 weeks in reserve, some had 2 weeks. If you're a small growing company or a mid-sized company and you've just invested in stuff, as soon as the cash flow stops, without those reserves, it is the lifeblood. But I think potentially that chase for constant cash flow has to be done. But at the same time, that can sort of change your focus of what you're doing. For a lot of businesses I work with, some smaller agencies or some other digital companies, you've got to kind of invest and speculate to get the money back longer term. So it's hard to keep cash flow reserves up. And you're always, when you're starting out, kind of working with clients on a kind of, well, if we hit this point, then we start getting some money in, but you've got to sell that before you get paid. Yes. And also, it's a kind of 50-50. You've got to reach these milestones. So I suppose it's about a company understanding its turnover, its costs before it does that. And again, distilling that down into what growth looks like. If growth is reliant on cash flow and you want to grow because you want to gain lots more team members or pick bigger clients, you're going to have to start smaller and work up. So I think once you've defined it, those KPIs can become a little bit more effective, but definitely cash flow being one of those.
So although not directly related to cash flow and performance with regard to agencies, etc., you produce a comprehensive state of the agency report, which provides information about, at least UK-based agencies and their online presence. What were the reasons for compiling the report, and what research did you have to do to put it together?
I've been fascinated with data for many years, and I've worked in a lot of audience data before starting Data Hive. And back in 2016, with GDPR coming up, I kind of saw that a lot of businesses were just not really bothered about the use of data or permissions. Marketing was very different even 4 years ago, really. The reason I sort of looked at the State of Agency report was I wanted to talk to agencies and understand where I could fit to help, or where people I know in my network could fit to help. One of the key ways of that is just reflecting what they're doing with their own digital. And it's one of those industries where, you imagine every digital agency to have a fantastic online presence. That's what they're selling. That's what they're kind of building for their customers. We jokingly say, quite a few of us in the industry sort of jokingly say about sort of a plumber's house is never finished, or a builder's house is never finished, because they're busy working on other people's. I think for me, the last year or two, the focus on how an agency brings itself to market, digital is still that key one. In a time where people are searching for things, or you want to represent and attract talent to your agency or customers, they're going to look at you. Networks are great and referrals are great, but it's about attracting, especially if you're reliant on growth and KPIs like cash flow, you need to utilize those sorts of channels, and digital is a fundamental one for digital companies. So I was going to say, in terms of researching that, it's almost who's walking the walk, not just talking the talk out of the digital agencies. And for me, looking city by city was a nice way to stir up good conversations, to share those insights, and to get some engagement around that.
And did you involve the target agencies in conversational emails, or was it just viewing what their online presence was like?
The first few cities I did, I spent a lot of detailed research by actually contacting as many as I could and interviewing them over the phone to ask about, what their focus was, what their kind of plans were for the next few years, where their website was a fit within that. After doing a few of those, we kind of found some patterns and some trends. What we did find as well is when you ask people for their opinion, they give you where they're going, and a lot of people were saying, well, we haven't got around to doing this yet, but we're planning to, and we're planning to do this. And so I thought it'd be interesting to just actually do the research without anybody's involvement, utilizing what you can see already online. I used to build websites, so it's easy to investigate the code and inspect things through Google. And there's a few tools out there that help you as well, just understand what they're running or what technologies are running on their site. And just piecing those together just gives me a pattern within that data set. There might be 950 agencies in London that we found. But how many of those, when you start looking at it, are a secure website and actually displaying some of the fundamental basics of web design that you need for modern web? And when we started investigating that, it was some quite interesting answers.
Going back to your analogy of the plumber and a plumber's house not ever being finished because he's too busy working for other people, and do you think that's used as an excuse when you do find loopholes in their online presence that they're not secure or they don't have click and chat or whatever it might be?
I think it's the first thing that gets brought up is, I know everybody, a lot of agencies apologize for the state of their website when I first talked to them, and when I did get in touch to say, hey, you're in this report research, I was just fascinated to see what you thought of it. They'd kind of say, oh yeah, my website, I keep meaning to do this. And I think there's a disconnect that time spent on their own website is time not working for customers or affecting their cash flow. I think for me, it's displaying, unlike a plumber's house where, okay, customers may not come around and have a look. It's like having a shop where people are going to come and check you out. Not having those things in place, would you apologize to potential customers? That's not really a way to start a business relationship. So I think it's an interesting time where businesses haven't really focused on their web. Since March, a lot more businesses have had to move digitally, and that's caught quite a few of them off guard.
I like the analogy that an online presence is like having a physical retail shop, and your website is the window of which you are promoting your product, goods, services, or whatever it might be. And not a lot of people get the fact that if it's not looking good, then people won't enter. And I think there's always a challenge that a website is, I'll use the term advisedly, brochureware, as opposed to as an engagement tool to be able to start people on a journey through understanding what that business is all about. Would you agree?
Yeah, I bizarrely enough, when I first left university, I worked for a guy that ran his own shops, and I was fascinated with watching how he changed things around in the shop week on week, because the same customers, he said, would come in week after week, but if there was a different layout, then they'd think something was different. They'd stay and browse, and it was really, I learned a lot just watching how he changed the windows around, why he did stuff, and the thing that fascinated me there was the reliance of a shop for footfall. Digital now means you can almost take that shop front to anybody and put it in front of them through either paid ads or getting them to it's like having a pop-up shop, but it's still got to work to attract, to showcase something. It's got to be relevant for people, and I think it's got to do some job to filter out people that aren't really going to be customers to people that kind of want to be but don't know who you are compared to others.
How do you use this report? And by that, I mean, is it promoted to potential end user clients to see? So are you trying to be able to say to potential clients that don't know which agency to choose, here's a report and it gives you an insight, a first base, if you like, to be able to see which are the people that are trying to do a good job and which those aren't?
I haven't actually. The reason I've done it is I come from an industry background and an agency background, and I was freelance for sort of 8 years before I even got into agencies. I'm keen to just help agencies, and there's a lot of great digital talent out there. Sometimes, we start as creatives, not business owners, but we migrate into starting agencies and we get together with other founders. This was never about naming and shaming or being a sort of recommend engine at the moment. I mean, it's something that the reason we don't list the agencies in each city is because we don't want people to think, get punished unduly. This is just a kind of, hey, this is stuff we can highlight for you. You can find where you are in the data. You can implement those changes because we recommend simple ways to do it, even if you're not sort of in that sort of frame of mind. It's something that serves to just help people. But from that, we can also say, what's the deeper struggle here? Is there a set of agencies in there that we can sort of bring out and really help? And how do they want that help? Is it through courses? Is it through meeting other experts? Is it through having events? And that just gives me more use of understanding how to take those insights further.
So you touch base on going and taking their product out and meeting at events and things like that. Having read the London-based report, I noticed that whilst many agencies use PPC, very few, only about 25%, used any form of lead generation software or marketing automation. Do you believe that the remaining 75 should employ such technology to prove to their clients that they understand this part of the marketing mix?
I think it's very interesting that you picked that up, because that's something that jumped out when you start to look at how we've structured the reports. I've kind of looked at web standards as the first section, which carries the highest score, because no amount of lead generation technology or setup or engagement, like blog content and amazing graphics, those don't matter if you don't actually get seen or found first, because you haven't got the basics in place.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is lead generation. And I think it's great to have a website that's found, and it's great to have great content. If you haven't planned to use it to bring customers towards you, I think that's where you're missing a business trick. There's no point unless you've got lead generation. I'd say that a website's not going to be clear if it's bringing you any benefit. But if you've got that lead generation in place, then at least you're actively trying to find the people you want to work with. These come back down to those two fundamental questions, which is, why do you want to grow and how do you want to grow? And bringing the how is part of that website journey. It's engaging the people, understanding, they understand why you want to grow and how you can help them grow, and then it brings those people through. So I think it's really key to use that. The onus is on the businesses. I mean, in effect, what's been interesting is some agencies will run a lot of different technology in their site just to showcase to clients. I go into conversion, for an example. I used to run different software so I could show clients different interfaces and help them decide which technology would work for them. But I would use that on my own site because my data wasn't private. But as an agency, you might be under a non-disclosure, so you can't show some great technology or design work you've done because that client's got you under an NDA, so you can't use it to market. There's an agency I know well in Sheffield, did some great work for a car company, but had a 4-year NDA on what they'd built.
Goodness.
So interestingly, when they actually came out of the NDA, they could promote that what they'd done, that technology had changed. So they'd been sort of cutting edge with their client, but they can't promote that as a service now 4 years later because people have already moved on. And so I think it's different clients and what they need. So wherever you can use your website to sort of help bring customers in, it's almost like saying, try this on for size. We go back to the shop analogy. Here's some changing rooms. Go and have a look, see if this fits you. Then let's sell it to you, or let's work with you to take it into your business.
I would think that, I may be wrong, but I would think that every company that goes to an agency is looking for the growth within their own business. So whether they want to sell more stuff or they want to get their brand across or whatever it might be. And the marketing mix has to include lead generation in that of some shape, make or form. Yet I find it really strange that there are so few people that are in agencies that do that. And having looked through technology vendors like BuiltWith to see what technology some of these agencies do use, there's quite a few technologies that you would think would be there that aren't there. And I don't know whether they just use the technology for their clients or whether they actually running the technology themselves. But I still think that there's quite a big gap in the fact that if you're going to an agency, you want to increase your sales and grow your business. And lead generation in a B2B world, let's call it lead generation, but it could be equally the same in a business to consumer world, is a key point of marketing these days.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think this is one of the reasons I'm fascinated by what behavior people show on their sites, because that kind of gives me an impression of what activity they're going to be talking to clients about. And that's come over doing, the last 3 or 4 years and looking at these reports and talking to many agencies. It's interesting what you see when you've sort of hand filtered sort of 4,000 agencies' websites, and the common things. I think a lot of times agencies can be guilty of just following along with what competitors are doing. So if you see somebody doing a really good lead generation form on their website, it's very quick that other people will start to try the same thing. But unless you've defined why you want to grow and how you want to grow, you'll use different points for that lead generation. But I think a lot of businesses that go to agencies don't understand some of the options or the ways that they can lead generate, and they can sell to customers or they can engage with customers. I think this last 3 months has been a bit of an eye opener. We've got a great local bakery down the road from us, never had an online site until March. Now they've got pre-orders, they've got a Woo form, WooCommerce, not a big site change. It's probably cost them 3 or 4 thousand, but it's opened up probably 4 months of continual work where people are ordering the bread and then going and picking it up. So it's click and collect. That wasn't there 14, 16 weeks ago, but the business is thriving. And actually, if they'd have done that before, as a small artisan bakers that's ordering stock and managing product, they're able to gauge what they need to bake before they actually open the shop, which I think is again, for customers or for businesses in general, that helps their cash flow.
It's like just-in-time management, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with where things are going, I'm seeing more and more small shops opening up like that, and that's exciting. It means a lot more work for agencies because as more businesses switch onto this, that's great. But I think those businesses will be looking for agencies that display that within themselves. And this is your point. I think if that's not there, as an agency, you're reliant on a customer either expecting you to be able to do what you're not displaying, or you never know that they didn't come to you because they just drop off. You've not engaged them in a lead generation yourself, so you don't get a chance to find out.
Now, whilst I don't think that your local baker who's now got an online presence, this video is applicable to them, I was also surprised that it was just under half of the agencies within the London report that didn't make the most of video on their site. Surely in today's digital age, video has become not a nice to have, but an essential part of your shop window.
Yeah, that was an interesting one for me. I mean, not all agencies are the same. So when we break them down by service types, you'd expect audio and visual companies, they all had them there. Some didn't, a few of them still weren't even actually using their own video on there. But you've got some companies that have the show reel. But I think where we were looking for video, it wasn't just the sort of animated backgrounds or the sort of generic video shot of what the agency room looks like and some people looking around a screen and while you had text over the top. This was actually video that showcased something that engaged in a way that was purposeful, embedded video that was able to be tracked or analyzed. So for me, things like anything where you've got something on a YouTube, a Vimeo, Wistia, I think for me that then gives people, it's the 30-second, 60-second kind of engagement points that are just missed. For digital, you see all that. TikTok's huge rise is all visual. You've got sort of lots of social media stuff that agencies are doing that's visual. It's just not represented on the website. So again, it feels like it's an overlooked point, and it may just be that agencies feel they don't know why they want to put video on there because they don't know how to lead gen with it. So it comes back down to sort of what they want to try and do with that site.
But surely if they're talking about SEO and PPC, then video, especially on YouTube, it does aid that with regard to SEO and Google choosing your site.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the whole sort of question and answer, that the way that Google's serving information back now, the rise of Quora in terms of people going to it for their, I think this is a missed opportunity, and it's something that, I use interviews on my website because, and I can see that there's a difference in the post reads versus the video reads, but the video's getting 40, 50 reads off 100 views of the site. So you kind of think, well, that wouldn't be there. Is that the thing that's engaging people and holding them on my site? But anything where you've got video just adds a little bit more rich content. It can be really persuasive as well. You can get so much more over in 30 seconds than you can by writing it. And I think you can sort of really use that to build a relationship point very quickly, especially when people are competing for eyeballs and attention at the moment.
Yeah, I think there was some research a few years ago that said the attention span of the average individual now is 8 seconds,
Yes.
which seems quite a short period of time. And the more words that you write, the more, unless it's really interesting, the less that people actually engage with it. And I think video delivers a whole lot more in a short space of time and does get people to stay on your site for maybe the whole length of the video if it's 2 or 3 minutes. So I think it's a pretty key area for most companies, not just the agencies, to be utilizing and getting the benefit in their SEO clicks.
Yeah, I think there's a really good, I think it's Ogilvy, I might be wrong here. There's a really good introduction to copywriting that was back in sort of the 80s or 90s, when it was all very advertising heavy in copywriting. And I think it was David Ogilvy had done this thing, which was that the title is there to bring your attention to the headline, the subline. The subline is there to bring you down to the first opening sentence. The first opening sentence is there to bring you to the second sentence. And it kept listing what all the pieces of that first top half of the page was for. And the message actually came really, really low down, because he said, if you don't catch their attention, you've lost, you can't get them to the next stage. And part of this is kind of engagement and lead gen. But like you say, if people aren't being found, so this is where there's some really obvious things that agencies have found in the reports could be doing better. Secure websites. Now, when you just go on a search and you try and find somebody, or their website shown in results, not having a secure website is just being punished by Google. Has been for 2 years, but we still see big chunks of agencies without secure websites. So that block, that message, that warning is the first thing people see about you before they click through. When we did the London report, there was 950 agencies we found based in London. There is actually more, but we couldn't get through to some of them. Some of them didn't list where they were or didn't actually show that they were in London in any way, shape or form. So we had to sort of remove them from the research because we weren't clear. So actually there's probably 150 to 200 businesses that just are floating in nowhere, and they're not getting seen because they're really punished, and these were full page warnings. These weren't even the unsecure small messages. These were like, this site looks is blocked. And that was really interesting from my research, because, without that, or without a fast page load speed, if you're trying to deliver a lot of stuff, you've got things there. So these aren't hard things to fix, and they're not expensive. Some of these are free fixes. So that's what the report's there, just to help say, if you can do it better, these are the things to work on.
I noticed also in the report that you made mention of the different core services of agencies, such as digital marketing, SEO, social media, yet there were none that cited CRO. Now, I'm not sure whether that was, you didn't include it in the list and therefore it wasn't, but do you believe this service is still only for the niche agencies?
I think CRO is going through an interesting time this last few years, and I've noticed a few other European businesses or CRO founders have all sort of mentioned a similar thing in the last 3 or 4 months. I don't think a lot of people we in the industry refer to it as CRO, but a lot of people wouldn't search CRO or conversion rate optimization. They would think of it as website design or development or growth hacking. It's kind of mixed under a load of different names, and I think where you had very clear services, especially in agencies, customer knowledge is the thing that drives what your service says. Because if everyone refers to your service as digital marketing, then you say you're digital marketing if those are the people that are searching. I find CROs one of those that's either overlooked. A lot of web development companies that offer platforms and systems don't mention much in it. There wasn't any that listed themselves as purely CRO within that set that we found. The services were offered as part of the marketing mix, and they were offered as part of digital marketing or full service agencies. Some web developers talked about it and mentioned it in their opening blurb about themselves, but it didn't seem to have a sort of pure niche one by itself. I know there are some in Manchester. When I've done other reports, they have stood out, 3 or 4, but I think it's becoming part of a bigger system now.
And do you think that's because they offer it as something other than CRO, so A/B testing or whatever it might be, or is it, as you intimated there, it's just part of digital marketing?
I think A/B testing is how a lot more is being referred to, or testing or conversion. That sort of user journeys. There's a range of different words for it that make it very hard to just say I deliver CRO.
Don't I know it?
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is so one thing, again, going back to how the behavior of websites shows what technology they're trying. There wasn't many people with CRO running, and that was a really clear indicator for me that I think it's not being fully grabbed or realized for agencies. And I think part of that is they're either working with clients who are too small to understand the benefit, that they've either got big clients and they're offering it as a 1 or 2, people are running it pretty much full time for their big clients. But I think the technologies there was no really clear leader in technology. There wasn't many in that data set. And again, I can dig deeper into that set and look at what the technologies were there. There were some heat mapping stuff. There were elements of some of the testing there. A lot of Google Analytics is run by agencies, but not a lot else. So I think that would likely be the free version for their own sites, because it's a big 6-figure for some to run detailed analytics in that way. But I think there's some opportunities there for the right agencies who know how to pitch and sell CRO, because I think, and for me, I think it's a good long-term service to add, because where you've got delivery of a site and then you're looking for the next customer, we often talk about hunting and farming with clients. If we can farm clients and get more out of them and grow with them, then the fruits of that labor, you deliver a good website project, and then you offer a 12-month or a 6-month optimization package, then the client's going to get more longer term. It depends which clients are switched on to that. And again, it's how they bring that up in their discussions.
I call that sort of thing marketing Velcro.
Yes.
Tiny little hooks, lots of them, easy to put together, very difficult to tear apart.
Yes, that's a really good way of looking at it. I think, interestingly, like I say, a lot of people say they're full service, but they're not when you actually investigate them. So a lot of the manual work behind the report is quite laborious, deconstructing what people say about themselves to actually where they are. So I didn't feel there was any pure CRO in there, which is why it didn't have anything in there. It was blended in with other stuff.
Just to round this all up, were there any key takeaways across all regions, and which areas delivered better stuff than others? Was that noticeable?
Yeah, so we've done Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, which is a nice 3-city comparison because we've got a few hills and a bit of bit of motorway dividing us. But Sheffield's very interesting because it's all the talent gets pulled between Leeds and Manchester because they've just got more budgets. They're bigger, thriving sort of cities at the minute. But there's a big range of of startups and things like that across those. I found a lot of those. There was a lot more up north that didn't have secure websites. There was a lot more of the web standards missing, and sort of neglect of lead generation. There are some, I've seen some changes as I look at the data year on year. We've got some more reports coming out later this year, into next year. So I'm interested to see how London looks this time next year, because I
Yeah.
think there's two aspects there. It's whether people have changed what they do, but then sadly there'll also be how many of these agencies are still actually around past COVID. So that might be a bit of an insightful piece, but also uncover that there's been a lot of agencies that unfortunately couldn't make it, or others broke out and started new. It'll be interesting to see what the shift is of that.
Yeah, I look forward to reading that again next year to see if there has been much movement across, because it could be, whilst there are some agencies that have gone to the wall, there are potentially more individuals that are starting up their own agencies. Well, Robin, it's been good to talk. It's been an interesting chat, and I look forward to seeing the differences between this year's report and next year's report and see what effect COVID has had. But Robin, thank you very much for your time. And I no doubt this time next year I'll be knocking on your door looking for a comment about 2021's report.
That's great. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thanks.